Coming from Southern California, I was trained from a very young age that I need to prepare for the earthquake. I lived in Southern California most of my life, and there's a lot of little earthquakes, but they're actually expecting the big one. And there were a few big ones over the years. I remember 1989, the Loma Prieta earthquake, Northridge earthquake, I was there for that, and definitely the ground shook. But they're saying, every 150 years, the major fault lines are going to basically preparing for the big one. So most people in Southern California, if you live there, you actually have an emergency supply just in case the big earthquake comes along the San Andreas Fault. And so they're saying they estimate that you need to have at least 3 days worth of supplies. So during those 3 days, you'll probably be isolated. So you need to kind of prepare because there's probably not going to have any kind of services for at least 3 days. So these are the things they tell you to prepare. Make sure that there's plenty of water. You need to have gallons and gallons of water to last for at least 3 days. Need to have 2 flashlights and also extra batteries because there's probably not going to be any electricity. Need to have toilet paper, especially in America. Americans love their toilet tissues. You need to have a first aid kit. Need to have canned foods. And also, you need to have a can opener. So canned food is basically useless unless you have a can opener. And then you need to have candles and not matches, because matches, especially the strike anywhere matches, if they get wet or something, they won't work. So have a lighter. So candles, lighters, and so forth. And so experts are telling us that the big one in Southern California, and a big one being at least 7.0, will inevitably hit California. The last one, in terms of the last big one in Northern California on the Hayward Fault, was in 1868. And so that was the last one. And 1868, that's over 150 years ago. So that one, which is kind of scary because our home in California is along the lines of the Hayward Fault there. But yeah, I mean, it's like, are you prepared? They're telling you, are you prepared for the big one, the big earthquake? I would say even more important question is Jesus Christ is coming back again. Are you prepared for his return? Are you prepared for that? I mentioned last week that scripture, there are 8 times more passages about Christ's second coming than about his first coming. As wonderful as Christmas is, and we all believe in Christmas, we should be 8 times more certain about his second coming. Revelation chapter 22, the last book and the last chapter in the Bible, in verse 7 and verse 12, Jesus says, "Behold, I am coming quickly." And the fact that Christ is coming back and can come back at any moment has a profound effect on how we live our lives. It changes how we live our lives. Especially as Christians, we need to be mindful that when we put our hope in Jesus Christ, it will change how we live. Last week we looked at the first point, and how it changes how we live our lives. Knowing that Christ could come back at any moment should cause us to immediate obedience. Immediate obedience. Verse 7, "Behold, I am coming quickly. Blessed is he who heeds, obeys the words of the prophecy of this book." Immediate obedience. Secondly, we're going to continue on today, is not only should knowing that Christ could come back at any moment cause us to obey Christ, but also it should cause immediate worship. Immediate worship. Look with me in verse 8. John says, "I, John, am the one who heard and saw the things. And when I heard and saw, I fell down and worshipped at the feet of the angel who showed me these things. But he said to me, 'Do not do that. I am a fellow servant of yours and of your brethren, the prophets, and those who heed the words of this book. Worship God.'" Worship God. The Apostle John was probably just overwhelmed by the vision that he was learning. Here, John is 95 years old. He's just about to die. He's being exiled on the island of Patmos, where God gives him his vision. He's probably overwhelmed, and he kind of confused the message with the messenger. And the angel tells him, hey, don't worship me, worship God. So, when we get a vision of God, and knowing for the fact that Christ is could come back at any moment, this should cause us to immediate worship. Well, what is worship? What is worship? You might think, well, worship is the songs that we sing. Or to others, you might think that I worship when I feel good about God. When there's kind of a warm, close feeling I have of God in my heart. For some of you, maybe you think worship is when you sing the great hymns of the faith, the ancient hymns of the faith, whereas others are probably thinking, no, worship, true worship, is when I sing those new songs that move me emotionally. For some of you, worship is loud. For others, worship is soft. Mistakenly, most people, and I think I could be included in here sometimes, most people, we go to church for what we can get, out of the music, for what we can get out of the sermon, for what we can get out of the fellowship, for what we can get to be blessed. Music, sermon, fellowship are not an end in themselves, but they are to stimulate us to truly worship God. Music and songs are the tools where we can express our worship to God. Our worship service must never be focused on the instruments, the tools, but focused on Christ. Not focused on what I get out of it, but what is it that God gets out of it? Worship is not about getting all we can get out of God. Worship is about giving all we can give. Am I, and I ask myself this a lot, am I focused more on performance or am I focused more on praise? Some of us think that, church is good, we evaluate church if I get something out of it, if I get something out of the sermon, or if I'm entertained, or if I feel good. But that's not what church is about. That's not what worship is about. Worship is about coming together, coming to God, and not getting all we can get out of Him, but giving all we can give to Him. When we go to church to worship God, that's done by giving, not getting. We go to give something to Him, offer something to Him. Granted, of course, when we offer and give God our praise and worship, we are blessed. We do receive blessing, but those are a byproduct. They are a byproduct of true worship, not the goal. The most important thing about worship is not the effect it has on you, but the effect it has on God. It's about Him. And that's what the angel here is reminding John. Worship God. That's why it's so important that we as Christians, we don't misplace the true meaning of worship. True worship is not about pleasing us. It's not about what am I going to get out of it. But true worship is about pleasing God. What is He going to get out of it? A few weeks ago, we had the Super Bowl, the Los Angeles Rams versus the Cincinnati Bengals. And me, coming from LA, I was very happy that the Los Angeles Rams won. It was a very wonderful playoffs, division series. The Super Bowl game itself was pretty remarkable. If those of you who followed it, it was pretty close in terms of a game. Both Cincinnati Bengals, although they lost, did a very good job. But the Cincinnati Bengals, they lost to the Los Angeles Rams. What was very interesting was that the next day, when Cincinnati went back Cincinnati Bengals went back to their hometown, there was a gigantic parade for them. There were over 45,000 fans that met them at the airport, honored them. People painted their faces and wore the Bengals jerseys, and were just very excited as the team came off the airplane. And right at the airport, there was kind of a parade for them, and there were speeches that were made, performances that were made, and they weren't the best, speeches. Some of these football players, they're not exactly the most coherent human beings on earth. But and the performances by the band, there was this one high school band that I heard was there. They were way off key.